Hello, I'm Martin L. Shoemaker, one of the authors in Robots Through the Ages, an exciting new anthology coming from Blackstone Publishing, July 25th, edited by Robert Silverberg and Bryan Thomas Schmidt. This book is a history of robot stories across the field of science fiction going back more than 100 years, including 3 new stories never before seen just for this volume, including one of mine. And I have loved the stories in this volume, and I would like to put together a video reviewing each of the different stories within it and share it with you so that you can see what you can get in this amazing volume. Next in our stories from Robots Through the Ages is a relatively recent one, Robinson Calculator by Paul Levinson. A story I loved, and I really thought it was one of my favorites in the collection because it's a story much like I might have written, with some of the same influences and some of Paul's experience. It felt like a story in the spirit I could really understand. I first noticed the name on a headstone in the Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. Robinson Calculator. I mean, would they be so blatant to bury one of their own under a tombstone which plainly identified the deceased as Calculator? That would bring hiding in plain sight to a whole new level. I'm not making this up. You'd see this with your own eyes if you were in the right spot in the cemetery. I'd understand if you didn't. Most people are only visiting the cemetery because they're grieving for a loved one. But sometimes there's less grief than other times. You know, for a member of the family by marriage, and you didn't really know the old guy all that well. And if there were no tears in your eyes and you looked in the right place, trust me, you'd see that name incised in stone too. Robinson Calculator. Paul tells me in discussions we had that, in fact, there really is such a tombstone. And this story was his attempt to explain that. And in the process, he created a fascinating new world. Because Paul's a pretty bright guy. Besides being an author, he's also a professor of media and communication sciences and a frequent commentator on various news shows on the subject of communication and technology and science fiction and the future. Here's one of his most recent works, The Plot to Save Socrates. You can find that in the QR code on the right. And so he is building a world where, without us knowing it, advanced robots have been around for decades, maybe centuries, and our narrator happens to be aware of this because his ex-sister-in-law was one of them. I was a professor of philosophy and a filmmaker, but also an amateur historian. Maybe not so amateur. The history of knowledge, an intrinsic part of epistemology, was inevitably a study of history too. I and many others had always wondered about the spark that had gotten our civilization going. The Chinese, the Arabs, many cultures had made great discoveries and accomplished great things. But there's something about the Greek and Roman combination that had ultimately ignited the science and technology that had lifted us off this planet, had cracked the code of life, and had created apps which certainly had a lot of the characteristics of human intelligence. Apps that answered questions, provided instructions. Apps you could practically fall in love with if you weren't careful. So Paul is planting a lot of seeds and raising a lot of questions as the story goes along. And in the end, he'll answer some of them, and some he won't. And I've asked him if there's more to this story, and he says, there may be coming. So I'm hoping this is a tease. But in the meantime, enjoy Robinson Calculator, which stands well on its own and will leave you wanting more.